So now I'm going to touch on the very issue and subject that your video was about, which was about language. So first I'm going to touch on the very foundation and root meaning of what language is, which is a system of communication. So you stated in your second video that I did not comprehend nor understand the original spoken language. You see, what you fail to grasp and comprehend is the very fundamental meaning and root understanding of what the very essence of language is. And that is communication. So you said that I don't understand the original spoken language of the ancient world. And what you fail to grasp is that language and communication existed well before man was even created. So for some reason, I think that you think that, let's say, ancient Hebrew or the ancient Cana-Phoenician language was the original spoken language. And I'm sorry to tell you, but that is just the documented, recorded original language. Or perhaps you think that maybe Egyptian language was the original language, which was ancient Kemet or Khmer. You see, language goes way back, way back in history, way before the ancient Egyptians. You see, it even goes back further than the ancient cavemen, who obviously communicated with one another and had a primitive form of language. Language and communication goes back, like I said, way before man was even created. Language and communication goes back to the most basic foundation of life forms that evolved on Earth. You see, you visualize language as something that is spoken. Language includes many aspects beyond the realm of vocal language and speaking and sounds. Language is a form of communication, like I said, and communication comes from the word common. You see, in order for life to evolve and exist and continue on, communication is based entirely on fertility. It is based on reproduction. And this reproductive factor involves many aspects of communication, or things that are in common, so that things can communicate and come together. You see, even the most primitive life forms on Earth, okay, single cell organisms, in order for them to live and create and continue living, they have to reproduce. So the most fundamental, basic foundation of communication is based upon sex and fertility. One must communicate with another in order to exist. So language and communication is actually based entirely upon fertility and sexual union. You see, you think language means vocal or sounds. The truth is, language just means communication. So the most primitive life forms communicated without words, without sounds. They communicated with symbols. They communicated with colors and gestures and movement. Okay? Much later on down the line was language um, evolved into a waveform of sound. You see, we communicate with language all the time without ever speaking a word, in our movements, in our emotional actions that we produce on our face, our attitude, the way we move, the way we gesture. Okay, one can read a person just by that alone. They don't need to hear any words. You can tell when a person's angry. You can tell when a person's sad or upset, etc. just by movements alone or colors. A person gets mad when they're red and angry. You get scared, you turn white as a ghost. Okay, that's why in nature you have color symbology, and these symbols reflect language. They reflect a form of communication to let others know and understand what is being portrayed. So you see, all living creatures that crawl or fly or walk or run and swim upon earth all use language communication. They use symbolic representation through colors and movements to communicate. Fish, for example, really most of them don't make sounds. Okay, they use coloration, they use movement to communicate, just like most primitive animals do. Okay, you'll see like butterflies, insects, animals. All you have to do is do a little research, and you'll see what I'm saying. So you see, we really have the same form of communication as, let's say, a ladybug does. You have more in common with language communication with insects and animals than you don't have. So basically what I'm saying is that every single living creature that exists upon Earth have a relative realm of language and communication. They are more closely related than they are not related. So you see, this is why language, now I'm talking modern language in the last 5 to 10,000 years, let's say, is more closely related and universal than it being different and separate from one another. So yes, while most may perceive them to be completely different, the real truth is that they are more alike than unalike. So you see, all of the languages of the world have more in common and are more universal versus separate than most realize. They are more alike than unalike. So you see, this is why the modern day English language came from its ancestor of Anglish. And the Anglish is a pagan Germanic language which evolved and came from and includes almost all other languages from the ancient world, including Roman Latin, which includes ancient Greek, which includes ancient Canaan, Phoenician, and Hebrew. And this is exactly why the English language, or the Anglish language, as well as Latin and Greek, are based entirely upon the ancient Cana Phoenician Hebrew language, or the Paleo-Hebrew. You see, this is exactly why all of those that I just mentioned all have what's known as alphabets. And the alphabets are the foundation and the form of communication used in all of these modern day languages, which the alphabet is based entirely upon the ancient Cana-Phoenician alphabet, or the Aleph Bet. So that's why when you look at the English alphabet and the Latin alphabet and the Greek alphabet, you'll notice that, of course, they all start with the letter A, or the Aleph, and the next letter is the Bet, or the B. You see, this is why almost all of the languages and the alphabets are more alike than unalike. They are based entirely upon the ancient Cana-Phoenician language and alphabet. So you see, this is why our modern day English language has what's known as phonetics from the ancient Phoenicians. I mean, why do you think we have what's called a phone? because it comes from the Phoenicians. It's a form of communication. So you see, our language or our alphabet is based entirely on the ancient Cana-Phoenicians. And you see, the ancient Cana-Phoenicians worshipped the bull god. Thus, the very reason and foundation of the alphabet is based entirely upon the ancient bull, which is the Aleph. And that's exactly why the ancient Paleo-Hebrew is the pictographic representation or symbol of the bull. So perhaps now you will understand why our language has what's known as syllables. And the earliest recorded syllable comes from the ancient place where they worshipped the bull or the same bull. And that is from ancient Ur, ancient Sumeria, ancient Mesopotamia. So you see, this is why the Torah and the Bible and the ancient Hebrew language and the alphabet is directly related to the religion or the Kabbalah, if you will. You see, they are universal. They basically both tell the same story. Once you do your research, you'll understand that. You see, most people think that you can't, cross over languages because they're completely different from one another, like you're accusing me of doing. But what you fail to recognize and understand is that once you see the code that is used, there is so much more in common and so much more that is unseen by the average person. Okay, all you have to do is begin to grasp what I'm saying, and you will start to see the unseen. I mean, there are literally thousands of examples, but let's just kind of boil it down to a couple so that you can start to grasp what I'm saying. Words like the, which means el, like el toro, which means the bull. What you don't see is the word the is the word theos. Theos means God. The means el, the means God, and el means God. You see, there's more of a relationship there than you recognize. I mean, I can go all day and night. Words like Eve, which is the goddess. Okay, she is the goddess of birth and all creation from darkness and the evening, which is why she's evil. Okay, and evil is the devil, because the devil is the deceiver of December, the one that is in decline, because the night is in decline, or the sun has descended to the underworld of darkness and evilness. Thus, the devil or the evil is the evil goddess, the one that is the image of the negative aspect. Well, of course, like a woman is negative. Her vagina is inward, while the male is positive or outward. So anyway, the eve is the dark aspect of the evening, which is why we have the word evolve, or we came from the goddess Eve, because we evolved, which of course is from darkness. And of course the Bible tells the same story, that everything was non-existent and dark, and then came the light, which is what our life is all about. We're inside of the cave of the goddess, the woman, in the darkness, and then we come out through her canal, and then we see the light and come into lightness. Just as our day starts at night, the darkness, and it goes into the daylight. So this is why the Hebrew word for the devil or Satan is shad, which is why God, the bull god, is Shaddai, and the devil in hell is Shad, like a shadow, the darkness. It's talking about the deceiver, the deceptive time of the year, when evilness takes over the goodness. What it's really talking about is just the evil winter or the darkness overtakes the sunlight, which is what nature does.